Hey YouTube, Dr. Sean here with another video on health optimization. This time I want to ask the daring question whether maybe a six-pack is bad for you. When is a six-pack on your abdomen actually unhealthy? I know this is probably going to be controversial, but I want to run by you in this video why I think that might be the case and why I don't want to have a six-pack anymore. I used to have one, and I kind of noticed that naturally it kind of went away, even though I'm doing a lot of interesting things, and it may not be a bad thing. So I have some observations I'm going to share and some science, so I want to talk to you about that. First of all, let's get into what a six-pack is. So a six-pack you get for two reasons. One, you have pronounced abdominal muscles, particularly the abdominis rectus, which line the anterior aspect of your abdomen. And two, you have a paucity or a lack of subcutaneous fat. So to have a visible six-pack, you need both of those things. If you have muscles that are undeveloped, you're not going to have a true pronounced six-pack. And if you have too much subcutaneous fat, you're not going to have that. So who has very good six-packs are people typically who are bodybuilding. Okay, so they develop those muscles as part of their competition. They actually reduce the amount of body fat, and in particular, they're trying to reduce the amount of subcutaneous fat because that's how they're scored, so based on how much muscle definition you have. But keep in mind, bodybuilding is not pursued for health, it's pursued in its truest form for competition. So the two are different, although a lot of bodybuilders are healthy. The opposite of that is also the case. There are a lot of bodybuilders who are unhealthy. And that's what I want to get into is a particular aspect of particular physique where you have a six-pack and it may not be a healthy thing. So first of all, what you have to do to get that six-pack is reduce in particular your subcutaneous fat. So I want to get into what that looks like because there are different types of fat, and Dr. Sean is about optimization. So you want more good muscle and you want less bad fat. So you got to know what fat is good and what fat is bad. And I got into that in my last YouTube video. Subcutaneous fat is fat underneath your skin. It goes around the body. Visceral fat, which is a very bad fat, is inside your abdomen. So there's two types of fat that make up your subcutaneous fat. Your superficial subcutaneous fat, which is between your skin, and this is your deep subcutaneous fat. So this is your back muscles, your vertebral body, and this is your abdomen. Most of your abdomen is made up of superficial subcutaneous fat. So when you're losing your six-pack, you're losing your superficial subcutaneous fat. Most of this fat back here is actually deep subcutaneous fat. So where you want definition, Dr. Sean says, in your back. But where you want some subcutaneous fat is in your front. Well, why? Why do you want subcutaneous fat if it's going to hide your six-pack? I'll tell you why. It's because a very important molecule called adiponectin is secreted by your superficial subcutaneous fat. Now, it's secreted by other areas in the body in too small of quantities to actually make it useful. But in the superficial subcutaneous fat depot, that is where the predominant amount of adiponectin comes from. So let's talk about adiponectin, why you want a thin layer of subcutaneous fat. It's beneficial because adiponectin comes from it. Adiponectin decreases inflammation in your macrophages, which are cells that fight infection. They're the ones that kill biological invaders inside your body. So macrophages are good, and if they're inflamed or you have inflammation in your macrophages, they're not going to work as well. So adiponectin helps maintain and condition your macrophages to fight infection. The other place it decreases inflammation is your endothelial cells. Endothelial cells line your cardiovascular tissues, your arteries, your veins, your capillaries. They're good. They produce nitric oxide and they help to maintain your cardiovascular health. Think heart health, think vascular health. So decreased inflammation, that is going to improve your condition and very beneficial to reduce that inflammation in those endothelials. This third place is in your muscle cells. You don't want to have inflammation in your muscles. And that is a problem. And chiefly, there's a lot of causes of it, but a big one that I like to talk about is myosteatosis, or fatty replacement of your muscle. So bodybuilders are all about the outside, looking good from the outside. I don't see any of them paying attention what's going on inside their body. So that means like getting an MRI and scanning and seeing if you got fat in the wrong places or you got fat in the right places. You got muscle that looks healthy, or is your muscle filled with fat, like what I call human marbling or myosteatosis? And bodybuilders aren't tracking that. It's remarkable how much time and effort and attention they pay to their bodies. If you want to look good, you got to look good from the inside and the outside. Pay attention to what's going on. That's why I love the MRI to do that. Now, finally, adiponectin works to improve your epithelial cells. Epithelial cells are so cool. I learned about them in medical school. It's remarkable. They're your skin on the outside of your body. But I remember learning this one fact about epithelial cells. You got cells all over your body. We had to learn about these different cells all over the body. There's hundreds of different types of cells. But do you know that your skin epithelial cells, they're all epithelial, except they're in one other location. They're inside your gut, from your mouth down to your distal part of your GI tract. And you can just imagine where that is. So those epithelial cells are on the inside, inside your gut and on the outside of your body, because technically your gut, believe it or not, is outside your body. So adiponectin helps to decrease inflammation in your skin, so on your body and your face, and inside your gut. Don't those sound like critical areas that you want to reduce your inflammation and be super healthy? Your skin and inside your gut, so you can have better metabolism, better nutrition, and just overall better health. And that's what adiponectin does. It's really important in that particular functionality. Now, it has a role. Sometimes people ask it, how does your body decide where to put fat? Like, I don't want it to go into my visceral fat. If you follow me, you know that's really bad. So you don't want it inside here. Well, one of the ways it gets regulated is through this molecule, adiponectin. So you want to be as healthy as you can possibly be, and you want to have adiponectin to help guide and dictate where that fat goes. So where you want it is this superficial layer on your abdomen, and you don't want your fat, your stored calories, energy going to either visceral fat or this other bad player down here called deep subcutaneous fat. So adiponectin helps. It plays a role in where your fat's going to go and how it's going to turn out, whether it's going to be really inflammatory like this stuff or really beneficial like adiponectin. So we see in studies that people live longer through this protective layer of subcutaneous fat. But sometimes they include deep subcutaneous fat in there. So some studies point to some benefit, but I think if we specifically looked at just superficial subcutaneous fat, where the origin of adiponectin comes, we'd see far more significance in those studies. So that's my commentary that I'm going to point out that I think we need specifically looking at studies with regard to lifespan and Healthspan on this particular fat depot, superficial subcutaneous fat. The other thing is that adiponectin does is it helps protect your heart, your cardiovascular system, your lungs, and your gut. So you have to think about adiponectin being beneficial for those important systems as part of your body. The other thing is decreased adiponectin. What are the consequences of decreased adiponectin? Well, it increases insulin resistance. So we see people with low levels of adiponectin have increased insulin resistance. So you can't move blood sugar intracellularly and all the other things that insulin provide, the valuable roles that in terms of maintenance and metabolism and your physiology insulin provides is decreased and diminished by the paucity or an absence or too low levels of adiponectin. The other thing it causes leptin resistance. So leptin resistance is in the news. A lot of studies, leptin resistance leads to obesity, and it's a bad player because you no longer get adequate signaling to decrease your appetite. You get leptin resistance, you have a huge appetite, and leads to obesity. So that's a problem. The other thing associated with abnormal adiponectin levels are, besides obesity, is anorexia. So if you don't have optimal levels of adiponectin, you can be too thin. You don't have an appropriate build. So I like to say, I mean, it's not popular with bodybuilders, but I'm just going to come out and say, I feel that bodybuilding, hypertrophy, too much muscle, is actually on a similar spectrum of body dysmorphism as anorexia. So you can have too much muscle and not enough fat, and it leads to a body dysmorphic type of pathology. So you basically want to have a build like Tarzan. And of course, too little muscle and too little fat is anorexia. And of course, you can have too much fat. So there's these spectrums. So you're right in the middle, from my perspective, is Tarzan and Jane, where they have healthy amount of muscle, not too much, because muscle comes with a metabolic tax. I mean, it is physiologically challenging to your body to acquire it and to maintain it. So there is a Goldilocks amount of muscle that you want, and I think it's found by how you look and how you perform. Now, if your look as you're trying to get a huge amount of muscle, then that's what you're going to go for. But you're going to do that at a metabolic expense to your physiology. So you want a ideal amount of that. The other thing abnormal adiponectin causes is atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So you need it to prevent atherosclerosis, this disease process within the arteries, and adiponectin helps to do that. And also abnormal fat distribution. Again, I talked about its regulation causing where fat should go, or lipodystrophy. So you want to have an optimal physiology telling your body to store calories in good fat depots like superficial subcutaneous fat and brown adipose tissue. You want more of those kind of healthy fats and less of the two bad players, visceral fat and deep subcutaneous fat. And the other one is muscle fat, myosteatosis, fatty replacement of your muscles. So your muscles, as you're unhealthy, start getting replaced with fat, and you can have organ fat. So gosh, for God's sakes, can we teach doctors to learn about these different types of fats and read them on exams? They blow them off and ignore them. And let's start, if the doctors aren't going to have concern about it, and the medical schools aren't concerned enough, they're not concerned enough about patient health to teach it to med students and who are going to be future doctors, then please, you as my subscribers, you learn about it, read your own scans until I need to figure out how we're going to get this curriculum taught in medical schools. In the meantime, I'm trying to share as much as possibly I can, and we'll see if I can. It feels like an awful big task to try to influence curriculum in medical schools that's set by an unknown, and this complicated entity that gets involved in that. So adiponectin is really, really important stuff. The other thing it's associated with is health span and lifespan. How long you live, and health span is how much you enjoy health for. So you can live for a very long time, but you may be unhealthy. And that particularly towards the end, as you've accumulated all these unhealthy fats that nobody once told you about, and your muscles are falling apart, and you're losing sarcopenia, and you're building everything. You can't pee, you can't defecate. All these biological functions are falling apart and degrading because no one's taught you these things. Adiponectin is a good one to help regulate you, and it's something you can actually test in blood tests. So that would be an interesting one. For God's sakes, test that before I test cholesterol. I'd for sure be testing my adiponectin. So what causes adiponectin besides, subcutaneous fat? How else can it be increased? Well, believe it or not, fasting. When you do extended fasting, increases your adiponectin. So I think that's where I've got my little layer of subcutaneous fat, and my six-pack that I formerly had when I was keto and I wasn't fasting. I lost my six-pack from, I think, extended fasting and also going carnivore. It's a very interesting relationship between fasting and fibroblast growth factor 21 gets produced when you do this fasting. And that's associated with, again, increasing your lifespan and also increasing your health span. So the last point I'm going to make is low-carb diets, are found to increase your adiponectin in a study. So that I found, and high-carb diets had no change in your adiponectin. So I think carnivore is beneficial because that will help increase your adiponectin, and that can help with regulating, make sure that you get that little bit of subcutaneous fat. So here's a good healthy abdomen. This guy has a thin layer of subcutaneous fat, just probably about the right amount. He's got an amazing MRI scan. I use him in a lot of my teachings. He's a colleague from the Army National Guard and a friend, Gabe. And Gabe has very little visceral fat. So when we scan Gabe in people that have very little visceral fat, and optimal muscle, I mean, he has really got some fantastic muscle. He's mostly dark, very little white. He's got a nice oval shape, and he's got this thin layer of fat on the outside. So that's that superficial subcutaneous fat that you want to have, and that's a look. So the other thing you want to do is, believe it or not, you want to be as healthy as possible. The more healthy you are, the more you are going to facilitate the efficacy of adiponectin and be able to make adiponectin when your body needs it. So you can take a screenshot of this. Sometimes I say screen shoot this. So take a screenshot of this so you can have my strategies for optimizing. And if you're really interested in optimizing your body, optimizing your appearance, optimizing your performance, optimizing your health, then consider working with me, because I am a health and performance optimizing physician. It's what I love to do. So you can learn more about working with me from my website. All right, well, thank you very much. If you like this video, give it a like. Consider sharing with other people. If you know somebody who's going into bodybuilding or is trying to get a six-pack, have them look at this video, share it with them. The other kind of interesting thing, I forgot to make this point. I was going to show six-packs, but I saw all these pictures of six-packs. Go to Google and Google six-packs. There is an unusual amount of people with six-packs doing this, or down like this, or they're just cut their heads off. So I'm beginning to think that when you lose that adiponectin, you lose that superficial subcutaneous fat, it affects your face. And I saw a lot of faces, unfortunately, and pretty attractive young people that get these six-pack, pretty, it's a girl, handsome for a guy, and they get a six-pack, they don't have too much fat, but they lose it, then their faces actually became less attractive. So I'm just going to challenge you, go and look at that. If you get these series of people that had a normal abdomen, I'm not talking about a fat, out of shape, obese person, but somebody that just had a little bit of subcutaneous fat, look at their face and then watch what happens as they lose that. Particularly in females, they lose that effeminate look to them and they get this harsher look and their skin doesn't look as good. So anyway, share this with anybody that you know might be trying to get a six-pack, to have them think maybe that's not the best strategy you have, particularly long-term, because I think you really want to have the benefit adiponectin. And consider subscribing to my channel. I'm trying to grow my channel to increase my ability to reach other people with my health optimizing messages. So consider subscribing to my channel as well. All right, well, thank you very much for your time and attention, your support. And as always, I welcome comments and questions, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. All right, Dr. Sean out. We'll see you on another health optimizing video.